Good morning, friends. I want to extend a warm welcome to you today. Everyone is welcome here. You are welcome here regardless of your age, your race, your income, your religion, or the gender with which you identify. You are welcome here regardless of who you love, who you vote for, the regrets that burden you, or the mistakes you have made. In this safe community, we support each other in the sacred task of becoming, celebrate the transcending mystery of life, and rely on the transforming power of love. Here we revere the words of the great teachers such as Jesus, the Buddha, and Confucius. It is, however, the task of every UU to be their own Buddha, their own Jesus, and their own Confucius. It is a cornerstone of our religion that even though we do not always have control over the events of our lives, we, each of us, is the author of our own life experience, and through the practice of loving kindness, we can heal our bodies, our minds, our spirits, and our planet. It is our work as a community to walk with each other along the spiritual pathways that lead us towards happiness, compassion, and life fully lived. And while we are a safe harbor where there is solace and healing, we are also a launching pad from which we are propelled into the tumult of life to live courageously, justly, and lovingly. In this sacred place, we create the structures that lift up the downtrodden, set the captives free, and heal the brokenhearted. We have learned that to be fully human is to be fully divine, and that with a little help from our friends, we can each tell our own unique story. Nico, would you like to welcome the people on Zoom?
Okay. So, Jim, would you come and light our chalice for us?
As we light our chalice this morning, we call upon the flame to guide us into the hidden places of our hearts. May it cast light on the adversaries within us, the fears, the doubts, the shadows that we wrestle with. In this light, may we find the courage not to defeat them, but to understand them. For in befriending our wild things, we find our wholeness and discover the truth of who we are.
Okay, should I? Okay, all right. Good morning again. I'm Lisa Fuller. Now I'm here as chair of the Stewardship Committee. So I have a very brief message. Being a steward of Buff is to commit to providing it with the financial support, the time and talents required for it to thrive. During the spring pledge drive each year, Buffers commit to supporting the financial responsibilities of the fellowship by making a pledge of financial or in-kind support. Our financial responsibilities include things like bills and staff and supplies. And our in-kind services, our in-kind support is the provision of services that would otherwise be an expense to Buff, such as cleaning or mowing or tech support. But paying bills is not where Buff stewardship ends. Outside of the pledge season, Buffers also commit to supporting the fellowship in other ways, as RE, or religious education teachers, contributing to Sunday services, music, or tech, supporting member events like our circle suppers that we had last night and our chili cook-off and fall festival of family fun this weekend, caring for our building and grounds by cleaning, mowing, and gardening. But occasionally, Buff's building and grounds require some extra attention, and that's when our stewardship is really required. Currently, 3 areas are a concern and a focus. The Fuller Fellowship Hall renovations that are needed include lighting, countertop replacement, and backsplash installation. So there'll be an announcement for a work day for that coming up. Also, repair of our roadside sign. You've probably noticed the woodpeckers have gone to town on our beautiful handcrafted wood sign, and it does need some tender loving care. And then also care for our memorial garden, which is in the front of the building, and where ashes of several different Buff members have been scattered over time, and that needs a little bit of cleaning this fall. So look for a call to participate in the work that's needed to address these important concerns. And in closing, if you have not already submitted a pledge of financial support for the current church year, which started July 1st and goes through June in next year, we have pledge packets available on the welcome table next door, and there's no minimum pledge expected. Next Sunday, we'll have an in-gathering ceremony for those who've recently signed the membership book or who feel called to sign as members of Buff. That'll be next Sunday during service. So thank you all for supporting Buff by being here on a Sunday morning. This is our unique place of seeking and connecting. Blessed be.
Jim has dignified my talk by calling it a sermon. Maybe, not quite. I've certainly listened to my share of sermons. I played music for the Catholic Church for 12 years. I played music for the Lutheran Church for 11 years. I'm playing music now for the Lutheran Church just down the road. And I'm happy to say it hasn't hurt me. So I've always wondered why I never got around to playing in pubs. I don't like pubs very much. I don't like being in a place where you have to scream to talk to people, you know, and the smell of stale beer just kind of turns me off. Anyway, so I wound up playing in churches all these years. Well, has rubbed off a little bit. Now, I've had conversations with Jim over the last couple of 3 years. We have talked about philosophy and religion and all that sort of thing. So this talk is a reflection of some of the things that we have talked about. So the adversary, recognizing the adversary. Well, my friends, there's the adversary. Get a good look. It's you. Yes, it's you. You think it's other people. No, it's not. It's you. And the other people see you as an adversary. Indeed, we see each other as adversaries. There's a process involved in that. But basically, well, here's a simple example. When I'm going down Washington, speaking about the wild thing, and some guy in an enormous pickup truck is tailgating me, I get a little upset. And I am tempted to open the moonroof and flip the bird. But I know better than that. And you know why? Because people go around armed these days. My older brother has a concealed carry permit. He lives in Kentucky. When he goes out, he carries his 9 with him. I'm serious. A lot of people do. You don't know it. I've got mine. So, just kidding. Okay, so, you know, it's dangerous out there. It can be. So understanding the idea of the adversary gives you a way to take in, to comprehend and take in your experience in life. Now, let us begin with the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo's painting of the Creation. Right here, there's God turning on Adam. He's flipping the switch. And there's Adam. Okay. The text says. Oh. Okay. Thank you. Okay. The text says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he, him. So I would like to reinterpret that a little bit. It is rather us who have made God in our image. We think of God, and this is still true. You know, we think of God as a big guy in the sky who renders judgment, who's going to throw us in the lake of fire if we misbehave, or open up the pearly gates and we'll all put on our halos and wings and gowns and play the harp. And there are a lot of folks that still think of it just like that. But I would rather say that human beings rise up or emerge in the act of imagination, in the act of imaging, that it is through perception, through imagination, that we experience ourselves. So, there's the mirror. Okay, now I have to go to my notes. What comes next? Consciousness is a great deal of debate about consciousness, been going on for millennia. Theologians and philosophers and now scientists have thrown their hat into the ring, the activity of neurons in the brain. Trying to describe consciousness is a little bit like trying to touch your right elbow with your right hand. I mean, you're using consciousness to try to analyze and define consciousness. And so there is a point where it becomes a useless exercise, actually. For me, as I have said, consciousness involves, and in fact is synonymous with perception, discernment, imagination. That's how I picture consciousness. Now, the timeline here, I got fascinated with this, went to Google, and I wanted to know, okay, we have jellyfish, insects, fish, dinosaurs, birds, mammals, blah, 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 200 million years and further back. Okay, Google defined consciousness as objective self-awareness. I have no idea what that means. 7 to 6 million years ago, presumably proto-humans, low apes, high apes. The first tools, 3.5 million years ago. Fire, 2 to 1 million years ago. I found that hard to believe. That long we've had fire. Cooking, they've pushed cooking back to 780,000 years ago. Spears, 500,000 years ago. Okay, here's the big change. Language, the rise of Homo sapiens, the Neanderthals, 200,000 years BC, and proto-language, which was just vowels, by the way. Like I would be oo, and Dennis would be e, and Jim would be ah, so we would have oo, e, ah. So, and then, of course, consonants, tang, tang, walla, walla, bing, bang. Okay. So that was huge. Language, an auditory symbol for us, for each one of us, for all of us collectively and for all of us singly. Okay, also, around 200,000 BC, people became aware of the biological differences between men and women. Apparently, this is when God took the rib out of Adam's side. God put a deep sleep on Adam, took a rib out of his side, and made Eve. Now, one thing, the Bible doesn't say anywhere that Adam ever woke up. Something to think about. Okay, clothing, 170,000 years ago. Awareness of death, that is to say funeral rites, 150,000 years. The first human figurine, the first object depicting human beings, 150,000 years ago. Bow and arrow, 72,000 years. The Chauvet cave painting, which you've all probably seen, the bison or the elk there on the wall, the red ochre. That's 30,000 years ago. The Villeneuve portrait, the first known portrait of human being, 27,000 years ago. That also is in France. Mirrors, 8,000 years ago, polished of obsidian and accurate. They're very, very good mirrors. Okay. Just 8,000 years ago, people, oh no, People were looking at themselves. Okay, riding horses, 5,000 years ago, riding, another big step. Symbols for ourselves, symbols for the world, symbols for experience, riding. Okay, the sword, 3,300 years ago. Chariot, war club, 3,000 years, math, approximately 2,000 years BC. Now, agriculture, there's some debate, 12,000 to 6,000 years BC. It is with the advent of agriculture, presumably, the patriarchal societies gathered momentum, and because there was males became militarized, there were fights for land and for food, surplus food. And so I'm not quite sure whether or if or how women ceded power to men or men just took it. Who knows? I don't know exactly, but that is presumably the advent of patriarchal society. That, of course, interestingly, is changing. Not without controversy, not without resistance, but it is changing. Okay, so I think, I'm ready for my first image. Okay, I'm going to put that there and try to remember. No, not a good idea. Okay. Okay. So here, this timeline, what I'm trying to show is here is the figure of our test. Okay. Now this gentleman, thank you, my assistant here. This gentleman has no hair, no face, no clothes, and apparently is unable to reproduce. But he is indicative of our experience. The boundary, your skin is the boundary. This is your body. You live presumably somewhere behind your eyes. That's where I live, somewhere up here behind my eyes. That's my experience. Okay, so this is huge. This was a huge step, or a huge misstep, perhaps. The interior, the inside, the ego, the body, and then outside, not me. Okay, so before we leave our posters, I wanted to do one thing. Jim and I talked about this, and I had kind of an aha moment, an insight. The Old Testament story talks about the serpent, the villain, who tempts Eve to eat the apple of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay, the serpent in this story is a villain. In other stories, the serpent is not a villain. In the Kundalini, for example, the serpent rises up through the chakras and leads us into an enlightenment. In the Caduceus, the Greek Caduceus, the serpent is, two serpents are entwined around the staff of Hermes, and Hermes is the conductor of commerce, healing, and something else. I forget. That's okay. All right. Healing is the main thing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I think the serpent is. There is the serpent. Now, we think of snake, but no, the serpent is us. The serpent is what happened over millions of years of evolution. The serpent, the Bible says the serpent was the most subtle creature in God's creation. And it is the serpent, it is the brain, it is our complexity as beings that has tempted us, that has pulled us in to our experience of dichotomy, of difference, of, if you will, enemies, friends and enemies. Okay, so we're ready to abandon our poster board here. Now, these posters and the signs here represent an effort to identify the on-off kind of thinking that we do. So, for example, Let's start with I. There is I, little old me, tiny in an enormous world. Here I am, inside my body, my brain, behind my eyes. This is I. Now, let's use the word me. I is the active, I do stuff, things happen to me, okay? I, me, okay? We all have that experience. Now, my experience as I, me is a little more encompassing. That's how I experience myself. I'm everything that is. I'm me, I'm what I see outside of me, I'm you, I'm everything that seems to be going on. And so, here, we just move the black over here. Here is not me. I, me, not me. Okay, let's move not me over here. And not me becomes an object. You're not me. That's not me. You're not me. That's not me. The trees, that's not me. This is me, and that's not me. So, this is the beginning of trouble. Okay? So, let's add one more word to our quest for identity. Here is the subject. Okay? Here is our object. You've probably heard that a lot. Subject and object, those of you who went to philosophy class. Okay, the subjective, that's you, that's your experience. The objective, that's what you see as the world around you and outside of you. Okay, well, so far we haven't really run into big trouble. Subject, object, I, me, not me. Okay, then the serpent comes along and tempts us to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or I would prefer to say agreement and disagreement. So let's take these down. You know, I discovered, putting these little signs up, I discovered these lovely little things, glue dots. Yeah, I like glue dots, they're pretty cool. Okay. All right. Uh-oh. The world just dropped off. Okay. This word, agree, fascinated me 40 years ago, well, excuse me, 50 years ago when I was in college. It actually is from Latin. Let's see if I can find my note here. Ad gratum. That is to please. That is what agree. That is the root of agree. All right. So, if we have agreements, you know, the serpent slinks along and challenges us to disagree. Here is agreement, here is disagreement. I agree, I disagree. Okay, with all kinds of things. I like salmon. I don't like liver. I like apples. I don't much care for kumquats. I like road trips. I don't care for flying in airplanes. Agree, disagree. And you can think of all the things that you agree with, that you like, that please you, set against a background of what you don't like, of which disagrees with you. There is that fundamental dichotomy that goes on in ourselves, in our heads. Scientists say in our brains. I'm not so sure. You know, that's a theory. Lots of hypotheses floating around. But for the sake of argument, let's say the brain. Okay, now going to qualify that a little further. Agree is good. Reminds me of a Tarzan movie. Tarzan says, what did he say? Banana's good. I forget exact Jane, good. I forget. Okay. That with which we disagree is bad. Okay. Uh-oh, my glue dots are getting a little dicey here. Come on, glue dots. Thank you. Agree, good. Disagree, bad. We're getting deeper into trouble here, folks. Now, we begin to consider behavior, the behavior of others. Virtue, which is good. Uh-oh. Ah. Virtue's got stuck up there. Okay. Virtue versus evil. Now we have qualified behavior. For example, here are your affirmations on the wall. I like them. That's why I'm here. I also believe in kindness, mercy, compassion, tolerance, justice, all that good stuff. But do you know what? There are a lot of folks who don't believe in that. There are a lot of folks who believe in more like what we call social Darwinism. Might makes right. The strong win. Furthermore, the strong, supposedly, the strong are willing to do and say whatever it takes to achieve their goals. And that is a superior recognition of what is real, and that entitles them to do so. They feel entitled. Yes. Now, what is my response? I don't know. I'm kind of a pacifist. But if somebody knocked the door down and beat up and raped my significant other, I might be tempted to go down and borrow the 9 from my brother. Actually, my brother's an ex-Marine, and he hangs out with all the Trumpsters at the VF Hall, and they get together and watch Fox News and hoot and holler and drink beer. And he has a closet full of guns. And you know what? He's waiting for somebody to knock the door. Hopefully, some liberals will come and try to knock the door down, and he can take them out before they get him. So this experience of enemy, of adversary, it hits home. And we may have to make some kind of decision. I mean, I prefer to be peaceable. I don't even know how to shoot a gun. But, in the event of violence, of me encountering violence, what would I do? I'm not sure. But we have gone from simple identity to evaluation, agree, disagree, good, bad, virtue, and evil. Okay, there's one more problem in our consciousness, and that is the idea of possession. Mine, yours. Apparently from this signage, evil belongs to you and virtue belongs to me. I'm not so sure. But possession becomes a problem. Okay, for example, Ukrainians are fighting Russia. The Ukrainians believe they are entitled to nationhood, to seek their destiny independently. Russia sees the Ukraine as a part of the old Soviet Empire, and they would like to welcome Ukraine back into the fold and also take advantage of the wealth of Ukraine and the grain resources and so forth and so on. Okay, in the Middle East, Hamas and Hezbollah feel like the Israelis do not belong there, that Palestine belongs to the Arabs, and that Iran is only to ready to second that thought. And there is enormous conflict. And what is the solution? I'm not sure. China seeks hegemony in the South China Sea and in Asia. And we say no. And our Navy, we sail our Navy through the Strait of Taiwan and all over the South China Sea, trying to counter the challenge from China. So possession, we see a progression here further and further down into the experience of adversity, of adversary, of enemy. How do we back away from that? Well, the Buddha suggested to relinquish attachment, to relinquish desire, attachment to everything, attachment even to your body, attachment to your consciousness, to seek enlightenment through the attainment of profound silence. Jesus advocated pacifism, turn the other cheek. There have been efforts to kind of reinterpret that, but no, I think when Jesus said turn the other cheek, he meant it. And he indeed actually marched down to Jerusalem and got killed. Muhammad, actually, the Quran, I didn't know this, the Quran was channeled by Muhammad. And there was dissension within the Islamic community, and Muhammad saw fit to try to end that, which he succeeded to some extent, but not entirely, and the Islamic community remains divided to this day. There are different answers. I like the pacifist answer, although honestly, I'm not sure if I could always be true to that. Abraham Lincoln, who many feel like was an enlightened human being, he had apparently had a palpable aura. Many spiritual teachers have spoken highly of Lincoln, and yet Lincoln was willing to plunge this country into the worst war it's ever experienced. Why? He said the Union must and shall be preserved, and he also felt like chattel slavery should be ended in this country, and it was. But at what expense? I think 2.5, 3 million young men died in the Civil War, and untold casualties. So one of you, somebody, was it you? They got up and said, somebody came up and said, vote your conscience. Yes, you have to vote your conscience. You have to act. You have to decide. You must make the decision about what is important to you and how you will behave in the advent of some kind of challenge from your adversary. And so I can leave you with this one thought. A teacher that I used to read a lot of, Krishnamurti, who was an Indian teacher that came over, was popular in the West, in Europe, and in this country. And Krishnamurti would leave his students with a rhetorical question. He would say, is it ever possible to be free of the conditioned mind of the serpent? And his students would pipe up and say, yes. And Krishnamurti would say, no, you're wrong. So his students would turn around and say, oh, well, then no. And Krishnamurti would say, no, you're wrong again. Is it ever possible to be free of the conditioned mind? And I will leave you with that question and your own effort to find a satisfactory answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Jim, why don't you just leave those up for now? And because there may be people after the service who want to discuss with you. So let's, Dennis and Nan and Candace, would you give us our final hymn? Oh,